Human accidentally shared pulse rhythm with an alien girl, but her culture's meaning was soft. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Jason had never been to this part of the station before. The cold metal walls, the steady hum of engines, and the flickering of lights above created an atmosphere he had grown used to. But there was something new about this place. As he walked through the corridors, his boots clicking softly on the ground, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His mind wandered back to the meeting earlier in the day, where he had been assigned a new mission, something that felt both strange and exciting. He had been given the task of accompanying an alien delegation, ensuring their safety during their time on the station. It wasn't just any delegation, though. The alien girl, Aria, was the one he had been tasked to look after. The moment he had met her, something had felt different. She wasn't like the other aliens he had met. Her skin, a deep shade of violet, shimmered under the lights as if reflecting the stars themselves. Her eyes, an intense shade of silver, seemed to pierce through him with a depth that unsettled him. They had exchanged words only briefly, and yet, there was a connection that lingered between them. It wasn't just the obvious differences in their appearance, his pale skin compared to her violet glow, but something deeper, something he couldn't quite understand. But now, as he stood near the entrance to her quarters, the reality of the situation began to hit him. He wasn't just protecting her from harm. He was also trying to understand her culture, her way of thinking, and, more importantly, the way her species viewed emotions. As he knocked on the door and entered, Aria was standing by the window, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. She turned to face him, her expression calm, yet unreadable. Jason noticed the slight shimmer in her eyes as she observed him. "You're late," she said softly, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. Jason raised an eyebrow, not sure how to respond. He had never been good at navigating situations like this, where silence seemed to speak louder than words. But as he stepped closer, he felt the beat of his heart sync with hers, a strange sensation that made his chest tighten. He wasn't sure what was happening, but something about the moment felt electric. Aria seemed to sense the change in the air, her gaze shifting to his chest, as if noticing the subtle shift in his pulse. "What's happening?" she asked, her tone both curious and cautious. Jason hesitated for a moment, trying to process the feeling coursing through him. He didn't know how to explain it. His pulse had somehow synchronized with hers, an unspoken bond that neither of them had expected. The air between them was charged with a quiet intensity, a tension that neither knew how to break. But Aria didn't seem disturbed by it. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her violet skin glowing softly in the dim light of the room. "In my culture," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "such connections are rare. It means something, but not in the way you might think." Jason swallowed hard, still unsure of how to process the situation. He had no idea what her culture might consider a connection between two beings from different worlds. But one thing was clear: whatever was happening between them was more than just a simple interaction. It was something that neither of them could easily explain, but both could feel. And as Aria's eyes met his, a slow realization began to settle over him. This wasn't just a simple duty he was fulfilling. It was something more profound, something that might change both their lives forever. Jason hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. He had spent his whole life thinking he understood connections, but this was different. Aria's gaze never wavered as she studied him, her violet eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the room. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable, but there was something in the way she held herself, something both delicate and strong, that made Jason wonder if she had been waiting for something like this to happen. "You're not like the others," Aria said quietly, her voice carrying an unexpected depth. Jason felt his heart skip a beat. The others? He had no idea what she meant, but something about the way she spoke made him feel like he had just stepped into a new world, one where everything he knew could shift in an instant. "How so?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Aria took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. The others see us as creatures to be studied, to be understood, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But you don't try to understand. You just are. Jason wasn't sure what to say to that. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to figure them out, but Arya wasn't like anyone he had ever met. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who, despite everything, seemed to have a profound understanding of what it meant to be connected. I don't think I'm doing anything special, he said, trying to play it off. Maybe it's just that I'm not used to seeing things through the same lens everyone else does. Arya looked up at him, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Maybe that's the difference, she mused. You're not trying to see through a lens. You're seeing things with your own eyes. Jason could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. He had never thought of it like that. All he knew was that he couldn't look at Arya the same way he had looked at others. There was something about her that was undeniable. It wasn't just her beauty, although that was striking. It was the way she moved, the way she held herself, the way she made him question everything he thought he knew about the universe. What do you mean, your own eyes? Jason asked, genuinely curious now. Arya stepped closer, her hand reaching out, but instead of touching him, she placed it lightly on the side of her own neck. We're not just creatures of instinct. My people are taught to connect with the energy of the universe, to feel it, to let it guide us, she explained. Jason listened intently, the words striking a chord deep within him. And you think I can do that? He asked. Arya's gaze softened. I think you already are, she said quietly. Jason swallowed, the weight of her words settling in his chest. It was hard to imagine that anything could be so simple, yet here he was, standing in front of someone who made him feel as though he was seeing the universe for the first time. I don't know how to do that, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to connect with, well, anything like that. Arya smiled, a reassuring warmth spreading across her face. You already have, she said. When you shared your pulse rhythm with me, you shared a part of yourself. You were already connected. You just didn't realize it. Jason felt his breath catch in his throat. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. He had never thought of it that way. His heart had just been beating, just been doing its job, but to Arya, it had meant something entirely different. But what does it mean for us? Jason asked, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. Arya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her violet eyes never leaving his. She reached up, her fingers brushing lightly against his chest, right over where his heart was still pounding. It means something, she whispered, that something extraordinary was unfolding. Arya stepped back, her gaze soft but intense, as if searching for something in him. Jason's heart raced again, though this time, it wasn't from anxiety. It was something else entirely. Something that resonated deep within him. Do you feel it? Arya asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Jason nodded slowly, not trusting his words at that moment. He wasn't sure what he felt. How could he? His whole life had been about logic, training, and control. But now, all of that seemed irrelevant. It's different, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I can feel it. Arya smiled softly, a touch of sadness in her eyes. It's the pulse, Jason. The rhythm of life that connects all beings. Not just in the physical sense, but in the deeper ways. You shared it with me. She paused, her gaze shifting to the window, as if looking out into a universe that was vast and full of unknowns. But it's not just about the heartbeats. It's about what we do with them. Jason didn't quite understand, but he was learning. Every word Arya spoke, every glance she gave him, pulled him further into a world he never knew existed. A world where connections weren't just physical, but emotional, spiritual even. What does it mean for us? Jason asked, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. He regretted it immediately, but Arya didn't seem offended. Instead, she turned back to him, her expression thoughtful. It means we have a choice, she said. A choice to accept or reject the connection. To understand it or let it go. Jason felt his pulse quicken again, but this time it was not out of fear or confusion. It was something else. Something that made his chest swell with an unfamiliar emotion. And what if I don't know how to accept it? He asked, his voice rough. Arya's smile deepened, though it was tinged with something sad and knowing. Then we learn together, she said softly. There's no manual for this, Jason. No instructions. Just two people, connected by something neither of us fully understands. The simplicity of her words left him breathless. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. A part of him wanted to run, to pull away from this strange, new world. But another part of him, the part that had been quietly growing since he met Arya, didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to stay in this moment, to explore whatever this connection was. I don't know how to begin, he admitted, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. But I want to try. Arya's eyes softened, and she took a step closer. That's all I need, she whispered. All we need. Jason felt a strange sense of peace wash over him, as though Arya had just opened a door to something he had always been searching for, though he hadn't known it. He had spent his life chasing after missions, after purpose, but now he realized that this moment, was the purpose he had been searching for. It wasn't in the battles he had fought or the awards he had earned. It was here, in this quiet room, with this alien woman who somehow felt more human to him than anyone he had ever known. What happens next? Jason asked, still unsure of what to expect, but eager to find out. Arya looked at him, her expression gentle but resolute. We take the next step, Jason, she said softly. Together. And for the first time in his life, Jason wasn't afraid to take that step. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but he knew he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Jason stood in the quiet room, the weight of Arya's words still lingering in the air. The connection between them had shifted from something he couldn't understand into something he couldn't ignore. He had never imagined he'd find himself in this position, standing on the edge of a new reality, but here he was. Arya, the alien girl who had once seemed so distant, so foreign, now felt strangely familiar. Her presence no longer felt like a challenge, but a promise. A promise that everything he had known about life, about connections, was only the beginning. Arya glanced at him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. You're thinking too much, she said with a smile, her voice light, but carrying an undeniable depth. Jason chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. I guess that's what I do best, he admitted, still unsure of what to make of the feelings stirring within him. Arya's smile softened, and she stepped closer. The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls no longer closing in with the same cold, mechanical nature they had before. It's okay to think, she said gently, but don't let your thoughts get in the way of what we're feeling right now. Sometimes, the best way to understand something is to simply let it happen. Jason took a deep breath, his pulse steadying as he allowed himself to focus on the present. I want to understand, Arya, he said quietly. I really do. But everything feels so different with you. With this, I don't know how to handle it. Arya reached out, her hand hovering just in front of his chest, the space between them charged with the unspoken tension that neither of them seemed able to ignore. You don't have to handle it, she replied softly. Just be in it. Be here, with me. The simplicity of her words struck Jason harder than he had expected. It wasn't about figuring everything out or making sense of it all. It was about being present, about sharing a moment, not for the sake of understanding, but for the sake of the connection itself. Arya's hand moved, her fingers lightly brushing his arm, and Jason felt his breath catch. The feeling was electric, yet comforting, as though every part of him had been waiting for this. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see an alien. He saw someone who, despite the differences in their worlds, understood him in a way no one else had. I think I'm ready, Jason said, his voice steady now, no longer full of uncertainty. Ready for what? Arya asked, her voice a soft whisper. Jason reached out, his fingers gently tracing the edge of her cheek, the smoothness of her violet skin beneath his touch sending a shiver through him. Ready to stop thinking, he said, his eyes locking with hers. Ready to just feel. Arya's smile widened, her expression softening as she took a step closer. Then let's feel, she whispered. And in that moment, everything else faded away. The world outside the room, the thoughts in his head, the uncertainty in his heart, they all disappeared. It was just the two of them, standing in a shared space of understanding, where nothing had to be explained, where simply being was enough. Jason felt something inside him click into place, the barriers he had built over the years slowly crumbling, replaced by a sense of freedom he had never known. Before, he wasn't alone. He wasn't just a human, and she wasn't just an alien. They were two beings, connected by something deeper than words. And for the first time, Jason realized that he didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to embrace the unknown, to embrace the journey ahead, with Arya by his side. "We're not so different after all," Jason murmured, his hand finding hers. Arya squeezed his hand, her touch warm against his skin. "No," she said softly. "We're not." And for that moment, it felt as if everything in the universe had fallen into place. There were no more questions, no more doubts. Just the quiet certainty that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Jason and Arya stood there for what felt like an eternity, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable but filled with a quiet understanding. The connection they had shared was still lingering, like an unspoken bond that neither of them could quite explain. Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside him. He had always prided himself on being in control, but now, standing next to Arya, he realized how little he truly understood about himself. "Do you ever wonder," Arya began softly, her voice almost a whisper, "if we're meant to be more than what we were told we were?" Jason turned to her, sensing the depth in her words. She wasn't just talking about their connection anymore. She was talking about life, about everything they had been taught, everything they had believed. "I used to think I had everything figured out," he replied, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But now, everything feels different." Arya smiled gently, her eyes filled with a quiet wisdom that Jason couldn't quite place. "That's the point, Jason. We don't have to have everything figured out. Maybe the journey is about learning to let go of control, to trust what's happening instead of questioning it." Jason looked at her, his heart racing once again, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of something else, something that made him feel more alive than he had ever felt. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said, his voice low. "It's not about having the answers, is it?" Arya shook her head, her smile softening. "No, it's about accepting the questions. It's about feeling instead of thinking." Jason felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He had always been someone who needed answers, who needed things to make sense. But now, with Arya by his side, he realized that some things didn't need to be understood to be meaningful. Some connections were just meant to be. The air between them seemed to shimmer as if the very space around them was alive with possibility. Jason reached out, his hand gently brushing against Arya's, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to analyze it. He simply let it happen. Arya's hand moved to meet his, her fingers entwining with his in a gesture that felt both natural and profound. "You're not like the others," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not afraid to feel." Jason's heart skipped a beat as he realized the truth in her words. He had always been afraid of feeling too much, afraid of what it might mean. But now, standing here with Arya, he realized that feeling was the only thing that truly mattered. "Neither are you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Arya's smile grew wider, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of joy and something deeper, something that Jason couldn't quite put into words. "Maybe that's why we're meant to be here, together," she said softly. Jason didn't have an answer, but he didn't need one. For the first time, he was willing to let go of the need for certainty. He was ready to simply be, to explore whatever this connection was, with Arya by his side. "Whatever comes next," Jason said, his voice steady. "I'm ready for it." Arya nodded, her expression filled with quiet determination. "So am I," she whispered. And in that moment, Jason knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. No questions, no doubts, just the two of them, connected by something deeper than either of them could truly understand, but powerful enough to change everything. Jason and Arya stood together in the quiet of the room, the weight of their shared understanding lingering in the air. The connection between them, once so unfamiliar, now felt like the most natural thing in the world. Jason had always been a man of logic, of structure, but now, he found himself standing in the presence of something far beyond that, a bond that transcended everything he thought he knew. Arya, with her violet skin and glowing eyes, was no longer just an alien. She was someone who made him feel alive in a way he had never experienced before. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never met?" Jason asked, his voice quiet, yet filled with curiosity. Arya turned to him, her expression thoughtful, as if contemplating the weight of his question. I don't think it matters, she replied softly. Because we have met. And that changes everything. Her words struck a chord deep within him. Jason had always believed in fate, in paths that were set before him. But now he saw that this moment, their connection, was something he could never have predicted. It was something they had created together, something powerful enough to change the course of their lives. I'm not sure what to do with all of this, Jason admitted, his voice laced with uncertainty. Everything feels different now. Arya reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his arm. The simple touch was enough to ground him, to remind him that they were in this together. You don't have to know everything right away, she said, her voice soft and reassuring. The answers will come in time. But for now, just be present. Feel what's happening between us. Jason nodded, taking a deep breath. He had spent so much of his life trying to control every aspect of it. But with Arya, he realized that control wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the connection they shared, the bond that had formed between them in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. Arya's smile softened as she stepped closer to him, her gaze never leaving his. I don't know where this will lead, Jason, she said, her voice full of honesty. But I know that whatever happens, I want to face it with you. Together. Jason's heart swelled at her words, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, with someone who saw him for who he truly was. I want that too, he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to walk through it with you. Arya's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. The station, the world outside, all of it disappeared as they stood there, bound by something far stronger than any force they had ever known. It was a feeling that ran deeper than logic, deeper than understanding. It was a feeling of being truly connected to another soul. Then let's take that first step together, Arya said softly, her voice a promise. Jason reached for her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin as their fingers intertwined. He didn't need to have all the answers. He didn't need to know exactly what the future would look like. All he needed was this moment, this connection, and the understanding that whatever happened, they would face it side by side. Together. Jason and Arya sat together in the quiet room, the soft hum of the station's engines the only sound breaking the stillness. The weight of the universe outside felt distant now, almost irrelevant compared to the shared space they occupied. Jason found himself constantly looking at Arya, her violet skin shimmering softly under the lights, her eyes reflecting a depth that he still couldn't fully grasp. But that was okay. For the first time, he didn't need to understand everything. He just needed to be. Arya, sensing his gaze, turned to him with a soft smile. You're thinking again, she said, her voice light but knowing. Jason chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I guess it's hard not to. Everything feels so different now. In a good way, though. Arya's smile deepened as she reached for his hand, her fingers brushing lightly against his. It's okay to be uncertain, she said softly. We're learning about each other, about ourselves, all at once. There's no rush to figure everything out. Jason nodded, his heart settling as her words sank in. He had spent so much time trying to understand his purpose, his place in the universe. But with Arya, he realized that there was more to life than understanding. There was feeling, and there was connection. I've never been good at not knowing, he admitted, his voice a little rough. But I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. Arya squeezed his hand gently, her eyes shining with something Jason couldn't quite define. You're doing fine, she said. Better than fine, actually. We're both stepping into the unknown together. Jason felt a warmth spread through him at her words. For once, the unknown didn't seem so terrifying. With Arya by his side, it felt more like an adventure waiting to unfold. I think that's what makes this so special, he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. We're doing this together. Whatever happens, we're facing it side by side. Arya nodded, her expression softening. Exactly. And I don't know what comes next, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not with you. Jason felt his chest tighten at her words. The connection between them had always been there, but now, it felt like it was growing, expanding into something deeper. He didn't know how to define it, and maybe that was the point. Maybe it didn't need a label. All that mattered was that it was real, and it was theirs. Do you think this is permanent? Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Arya turned to him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't name. I think it's as permanent as we make it, she replied, her voice steady. Connections like this don't just happen by chance. We've built something here, Jason. And I'm not going anywhere. Jason felt a rush of emotions he hadn't expected. Relief, hope, and something deeper, something that felt like belonging. He didn't need to know all the answers, didn't need to predict every twist of fate. With Arya, he realized that the journey itself was what mattered. I'm glad, he whispered, his hand tightening around hers. Because I don't want to be anywhere else. Arya leaned her head against his shoulder, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Then we'll stay here, together. And for the first time, Jason felt truly at peace. The uncertainties of life still loomed ahead, but in this moment, with Arya beside him, everything felt right. There was no need for answers, no need to rush. All that mattered was that they were in this together. And that, for now, was enough. Jason and Arya sat together, the quiet hum of the station a constant in the background. It felt strange, in a way, how everything seemed so still, yet they both knew that things had changed. Jason's heart was still racing, but now it wasn't from fear or uncertainty. It was from something deeper, something real. They had crossed a line that neither of them could undo, and yet, they both knew that it wasn't a mistake. It was exactly where they were meant to be. Do you ever wonder if this is too much? Jason asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Arya turned her head to face him, her violet eyes glowing in the dim light. Her expression was calm, but there was an understanding in her gaze, as if she knew exactly what he meant. Too much? She repeated, her voice gentle. What do you mean? Jason ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts swirling. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like everything is happening too fast. Like, one moment we're strangers, and the next, I'm here, sitting next to you, feeling like I've known you forever. Arya's smile softened, and she placed her hand over his. Maybe it's not too fast. Maybe it's just right. Jason looked at her, feeling his chest tighten. He had never been the type to give into emotions, to let things happen without a plan or a reason. But with Arya, it was different. He didn't need a plan. He didn't need to know what was going to happen next. All he needed was this moment, with her, and that was enough. You make it seem so simple, Jason said with a soft chuckle. I guess I've spent so much time overthinking everything that I never stopped to just feel. Arya squeezed his hand, her eyes locking with his. Sometimes, Jason, it's okay to just feel. To just be in the moment and let things unfold naturally. Jason took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. I'm not used to that, he admitted. But I want to try. With you. Arya's smile grew, and for the first time in a long while, Jason felt truly at peace. The uncertainty that had clouded his mind seemed to fade, replaced by something simpler and far more powerful. I think you're already doing it, she whispered. You're here. With me. That's all we need right now. Jason leaned back, his gaze fixed on Arya. Her words were like a balm to the wounds he didn't even know he had. In that moment, he realized that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about the connections they made, the moments they shared, and the people who made those moments worthwhile. I don't know where this is going, Jason said quietly. But I do know one thing. I don't want to be anywhere else. Arya's eyes softened, and she nodded. Neither do I, she said. The room was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't filled with the weight of unanswered questions. It was filled with something else, a sense of possibility, of two people standing at the edge of something unknown but beautiful, ready to take the next step together, whatever it might be. So, Jason said after a moment, his voice breaking the silence. What now? Arya's smile was small but knowing. Now, she said softly, we just keep going. Together. And in that moment, Jason knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Arya by his side. They didn't need to know all the answers. They just needed each other. And that, for now, was enough. Jason and Arya spent the following days in a quiet, unspoken harmony, both of them growing more comfortable with the connection that had formed between them. There was something about their bond that defied explanation, yet it felt more real than anything either of them had ever experienced. The station, once cold and distant, now seemed like a backdrop to their shared space. Every moment felt like a small step forward, even when no words were exchanged. They didn't need to speak to understand each other. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was filled with the kind of understanding that only comes when two people are truly in tune with each other. Arya, with her calm demeanor and quiet strength, seemed to have a way of making everything feel less complicated. Jason found himself drawn to her more and more, not just because of the way she looked or the mystery of her origins, but because of the way she made him feel seen, understood. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" Jason asked one evening, his voice soft, as he sat across from Arya at the small table in their shared quarters. Arya looked up from the small console in front of her, her eyes meeting his with a calmness that somehow made everything feel okay. "I think about it," she said, her voice steady. "But I don't dwell on it." Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How do you do that? How do you not worry about the future?" Arya smiled, her lips curving up slightly. "Because the future is just a series of moments waiting to happen. If we try to control it too much, we miss out on what's right in front of us." Jason thought about that for a moment, letting the words sink in. He had always been someone who thought ahead, who planned for every possible outcome. But now, in Arya's presence, it felt like he could let go of some of that tension, if only for a little while. "I guess I've spent so much time planning," Jason admitted, his voice quiet. "But I'm realizing that maybe I don't need to plan everything. Maybe I can just be." Arya's eyes softened as she leaned back in her seat, her expression thoughtful. "Exactly. Just be." There was something so simple, so peaceful about her words, and for the first time in a long time, Jason felt like he could breathe without worrying about the weight of the world on his shoulders. The station, the mission, the endless questions of what he was supposed to do with his life. It all seemed less pressing in that moment. The only thing that mattered was the here and now. Jason stood up, moving over to where Arya was sitting. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know I want to face it with you." Arya looked up at him, her eyes reflecting something he couldn't quite define. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was trust. "And I want to face it with you too," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. No words were necessary. In that brief silence, everything between them was understood. They didn't need to have all the answers. They didn't need to know where their journey was leading them. All they needed was this moment, this connection. And in that moment, Jason knew that whatever came next, it would be okay. He wasn't alone. He wasn't facing the unknown by himself. With Arya, he was ready for whatever the future might bring.